Good evening. We are in the book of Daniel. We last week did the introductory material, which to me is always interesting, but for some it's just we got to get through it and we go on. So we're in chapter 1 now of the book of Daniel. As we enter into this, I want us to realize some things about both Israel and Judah. Israel was taken into Assyrian captivity in 721 BC. Now, let's talk about the way the Assyrians operated. The Assyrians, remember we talked about this last week, the Assyrians like to take people from one area and move them to another area that was similar to their home country. So they could easily fit in, but they would not be easily set up for rebellion. That's what they're trying to avoid, and it's the reason they move them. So, of course, that leads to ultimately in the New Testament, Samaria, which ends up being a very, very mixed group of people. Remember that Josiah was the last of the good kings. He was the one that they discovered, of all things, they discovered the Word of God in the temple. Where would you expect to find it? But that's where they found it. When he read it, when he heard it read to him, he was deeply upset because he realized that they had violated the will of God. And by the way, if you read the book of Deuteronomy, for example, or you read the prayer of Solomon at the dedication of the temple, it is very clear what's going to happen if you don't live up to what God wants. And so Josiah read these things and he realized we're in desperate trouble. And he sent to find out from God what was going to be the case. God basically said Judah at the moment is irretrievable. Not that God wouldn't have taken them if they'd changed, but they're not going to change. He knew that. But he said, I won't destroy Judah or send them into captivity until after your death. And that's the critical matter for us. So after Josiah's death, Judah was ruled by his son Jehoahaz. 3 months later, he was deposed by the king of Egypt and replaced by his brother Eliakim, who was renamed Jehoiakim. So you get in this section right through here, and when you look through Kings, and you almost can't tell the players without a program, because the names just keep changing all the way through. During the reign of Jehoiakim, the nation of Assyria was decisively eliminated at the Battle of Carchemish. That's in 606 BC. So now all of a sudden we got the movement to a great change, and the change is going to be the transition into Babylon, and they're going to become the dominant world power, taking over, as it were, for the Assyrians. In the third year of his reign, Daniel was taken into captivity by Nebuchadnezzar. Nebuchadnezzar is the son of Nabopolassar, the founder of the Neo-Babylonian Empire, 625 BC. Remember, Neo means new, and New Babylonian Empire. God used him to besiege Jerusalem, and he gave it into his hand. He is called king, but at the point when he defeats Jerusalem, he's not king. I think we mentioned that last week, that this is proleptically spoken of. That is, this is what he would be, not what he is. So, and he does quickly become king, of course. Daniel apparently used the Babylonian method of counting years, while Jeremiah used the Jewish method, which counted the year of ascension as a year of reign. The Babylonians did not count the year of ascension. They considered it's kind of like a baby being born. You don't count in this country. We don't count the baby as being a day old when it's a day of conception. So imagine it somewhat that way. The year of ascension to the Babylonians was not counted. It was like like a baby in the womb, so to speak. It's a similar type of situation. And that's why you get this contrast between Jeremiah in Jeremiah chapter 25 and Daniel in Daniel chapter 1. The sacred vessels were placed in the house of Nebuchadnezzar's god, Marduk, who is also known as Bel, B-E-L. And I think I mentioned last week, you have to forgive me because I teach Daniel at different places, so sometimes I can't remember who did I tell what. You know, so if I start repeating myself, just give me time. We'll get into something you've not heard before, I promise you. In the Apocrypha, there is a book called Bel and the Dragon. It's B-E-L. It's not a bell like you ring a bell. It's the god of the Babylonian people. And that's where the sacred vessels are put. You might say, why emphasize that? Why? Because when you get to chapter 5, all of a sudden, we're going to see the temple items again. They're going to reappear at that particular point in time. Not that they were ever lost. They knew where they were, but they show up, and they show up in a bad way, particularly for Babylon. So let's read these opening verses. In the 3rd year of the reign of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came to Jerusalem and besieged it. And the Lord gave Jehoiakim, king of Judah, into his hand with some of the articles of the house of God, which he carried into the land of Shinar to the house of his God, and brought the articles into the treasure house of his God. The land of Shinar is right there around Babylon. We'll pick up on that again later in the book. It comes up every now and then, but that's what we're talking about at this point. Notice it says, the Lord gave Jehoiakim, king of Judah, into his hand. We've got to remember always that God is in charge. And I know I've highlighted this before, but brethren, we'll keep highlighting it. We need to quit letting who is elected, even to the office of president, we need to quit letting that be an unsettling factor in our lives. It doesn't matter who is president, because God is commander-in-chief. Is the best way to put it. And we want to remember that, something that we see to some extent in this book. All right, look at verses 3 and 4 then, where it says, Then the king instructed Ashpenaz, the master of his eunuchs, to bring some of the children of Israel and some of the king's descendants and some of the nobles, young men in whom there was no blemish, but good-looking, gifted in all wisdom, possessing knowledge and quick to understand, who had ability to serve the king's palace, and whom they might teach the language and the literature of the Chaldeans. And by the way, most interesting, it's not going to be long before the book of Daniel, in regards to the original manuscripts, what we have at least, was passed down, it begins to be written in guess what? Aramaic. And it's written in Aramaic all the way until the end of chapter 7. And then suddenly goes back to Hebrew. You might say, well, why? And I don't know that I have all the answers to that. But I think part is because you've got the Babylonian people that need to know about God. And they do find out about God. Nebuchadnezzar finds out about God. Belshazzar finds out about God. So I think that may be the reason. You say, why chapter 7? Because 6 involves the Medo-Persian Empire. That's true. But 7, you'll notice, is written during the reign of Belshazzar. So it's still in Babylon. And that's why you still find Aramaic in the 7th chapter. And very, very interesting. God always writes to where people can understand. I don't know if we really think about that. But when you look at, for example, the New Testament, it is written preeminently in Koine Greek. And if you're spelling that, it's Koine. The E is pronounced like a long A when you say it. And that just means the Greek of the common man. It's not classical Greek. Classical Greek was not spoken by the common man. Koine Greek was. Why is that important? Because Koine Greek has a unique property about it. It's wonderfully done for us to be able to have tenses well expressed. And you might say, what difference does that make? Let me quickly, to help us understand, let's look at 1 Corinthians chapter 6. 1 Corinthians chapter 6. We'll go down to verses 9 through 11. We'll just go to verse 11. In 9 and 10, he gives a list of sins that are going to keep someone out of the kingdom of heaven. And then in 11, he says, and such were some of you, but you were washed, but you were sanctified, but you were justified in the name of the Lord Jesus and by the Spirit of our God. Okay. In Koine Greek, the word washed is in middle voice. And for us, that doesn't mean a thing in the world. But middle voice means that both sides have a role to play. So in the washing, listen, what did Ananias tell Paul? What are you waiting for? Get up and be baptized. Did Paul have a role to play? Yes. He had to get up and be baptized. He had to make the choice. Now, is the washing complete without God? No, it's not. And so each has a part to play. Paul's got to respond, or anybody else has to respond to the gospel message, and then God does the washing. But now watch. The next two words, sanctified and justified, are both passive. And if it's passive, what does that mean? It means I don't have anything to do with it. You know, I have no part in it. I have no role to play in that. And if you look, for example, I'm not going to keep going too far with this, but if you look at 1 Corinthians chapter 15, every time we see the word rise or raised is passive. Jesus did not raise himself from the dead. Jesus didn't even play a role in it. He was passive in the resurrection. So Paul, in Romans chapter 1, verse 4, says, raised by the Spirit of holiness. So did the Holy Spirit raise him from the dead? You know, looks like it. You know, that'd be my answer. All right. So God always wrote where people understand it. That's where I started, and I'm illustrating only to get you there. So as long as the Babylonian nation was in some kind of power, this book was written in Aramaic. It picks up that after what? After Daniel learns Aramaic. You see, after he learns the language of the Chaldeans, that's when he starts writing in that language. And we'll see that as we go a little bit further. Please notice in verses 3 and 4 that young men, according to, of all things, a writer named Young, young men could be used of children all the way up to the age of 40. I do not believe Daniel was 40. I believe he was more likely a younger man altogether, but it had that possibility at least. No physical imperfections. They had to be without blemish. They had to be handsome, not homely. Isn't that something? The Babylonian king didn't want any homely people working in the castle. You had to be good looking to work with the Babylonian king. Don't ask me why. I'm just telling you that's the way it was. You know, that's the way he had it. They had to have the ability to make right judgments. See, he's going to put these people in positions of authority, and he doesn't want somebody in a position of authority who cannot make a good judgment. He wants people who can make good decisions, and so he chooses those kind of people. They had to be intelligent. They had to have knowledge. They had to have the ability to learn, and they're going to have to learn a lot. And so very, very important there as well. And that's the next point. They have to be good learners. And then finally, they had to be competent. and that is able to do what's expected of them. It's wonderful to know what you ought to do, but if you can't do it, well, use are you. I mean, other than telling somebody else how to do it, that's about the only answer. Now, I'm going to make a side observation here. And the side observation is this. They were put in the charge of the chief of the eunuchs. It would not be unusual for a person in a position of power in a government of that era, really all the way up to the New Testament, for them to be a eunuch. Do you remember the Ethiopian man on the road between Jerusalem and Gaza, deserted place, Acts chapter 8? What was he? He's a eunuch. Why? Well, he's got charge of the treasury. And the theory, and it is a theory, but the theory these kings operate under was, if he's a eunuch, he's not allowed to be tempted by women. See, think Matahari. You ever heard of Matahari? Okay, you have to be a history buff, really, but to know Matahari. But she seduced men and got information that way. That was her role. Well, these guys supposedly can't be seduced, because they're eunuchs. Now, was Daniel made a eunuch? I don't know. Does it appear that he could have been? And the answer to that is yes. It appears he could have been a eunuch. He's put in charge of the chief of the eunuchs, and so that would give us at least that possibility. Verse 5. And the king appointed for them a daily provision of the king's delicacies and of the wine which he drank, and 3 years of training for them, so at the end of that time they might serve before the king. Okay, they had to be given provision from the king's delicacies. What are these? I do not know. It's a perfectly good answer. Don't be afraid to use it. If you don't know, don't answer it. It could be that some of this includes unclean animals. But notice I said it could be. I don't know. The reason that Daniel's going to get a little bit upset about this and try to deal with it. But not just the delicacies, he also would have to drink king's wine, and he would be in training for 3 years. I mean, they had to learn all the wisdom of the wisest men in the world at the time. I'm talking about human wisdom. I'm talking about God's wisdom. But they're well trained. This is a lot like Moses in the household of Pharaoh. He would have been among the best trained men in all the world in his day. So we've got something similar to that. Young says that they were to be of the royal seed. Pick up at verse 6. Now from among those of the sons of Judah were Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. How many know those names that way? Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Most of us don't. We call them Shadrach, Meshach, and the little girl said, "To bed we go." Okay? Abednego. Okay, that's what we usually call them. But their Hebrew names are listed here for us. So we got Hananiah, Azariah, and Mishael are the three of them, along with Daniel. Probably, according to Young, of the royal seed. Certainly that's listed. You saw that earlier as a possibility that came from the princes and the nobles and things like that. In this way, the king of Babylon would strengthen his cabinet, because he would have the best and the brightest of whatever land he invaded. And he'd be putting them in his cabinet and asking them to serve in that position. Now, Nebuchadnezzar was, again, thinking like a worldly person, but he wanted these leaders to be taken out of their element. And in order to do that, in order to keep them from resisting Babylonian culture, he changed their names. And so, references to God are removed and they're replaced with Babylonian gods. So Daniel is actually named Belteshazzar. And very, very rarely do we see that name in the book of Daniel. He usually sticks with his Hebrew name all the way through. And we saw last week, Daniel did the writing, the Lord said so. So if the Lord said so, I'm going to say, okay, that's who wrote it, for sure. So he doesn't call himself by this name, but Belteshazzar means Bel, and remember that's a god, protect his life. Whereas Daniel means God is my judge. So take away the reference to God. By the way, reference to God. Where is the reference to God in Daniel? El, E-L at the end. El, that's God. That's what we're talking about. So Daniel. And then you've got Hananiah, which means God is gracious in Hebrew. They changed his name to Shadrach, which means commanded of Aku, another god of the Babylonians. So again, I want to take away the reference to the God of heaven and put in the reference to a Babylonian god, trying to pull them away from where they came from. Mishael is who is God. Meshach, who is Aku. So again, remove the reference, put in references to your own gods. Finally, Azariah means the Lord helps. And Abednego means a servant of Nebo, another god of the Babylonians. So all of these young men, these four, are renamed with Babylonian names that are attributing some sort of power to the god of Babylon, or a god of Babylon. They have multiple gods. They're polytheists. Poly means many, so they believe in many gods. By the way, if we get to chapter 3, that's going to play an interesting role. Because everybody else, except the three, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, everybody else, they're polytheists anyway. They don't care if they bow down under another god or an idol. What difference does it make? But Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego are servants of the living God, and so they won't do that. They're monotheists, not polytheists. You see where all this begins to weave together? Okay, any questions so far? Or comments? You're welcome to do so. Is it so muddy you don't know what to ask? It's always a danger there. Okay, let's go a little bit further. So verse 7 is where we got those names. To them, the chief of the eunuchs gave names. He gave Daniel the name Belteshazzar, to Hananiah, Shadrach, to Mishael, Meshach, and Azariah, Abednego. But Daniel purposed in his heart that he would not defile himself with the portion of the king's delicacies, nor with the wine which he drank. Therefore he requested of the chief of the eunuchs that he might not defile himself. What do I know about the wine of Babylon? Not very much. I can tell you that it would not have had an alcohol content of above 10%. How can I tell you that? Because the first people to introduce distillation were the Arabs, and they didn't introduce it until 900 AD. So we know they didn't have distillation back in this era. It did ferment, not questioning that, but they didn't have distillation. So that's the little bit that I would know about that. Why is he worried about eating from the king's table? Well, we really don't know. I can go to the references, and I've given you some. It could be based on God's law, because he has specific laws about what you eat. It might be today, the king might be serving something they could eat. Tomorrow, maybe something they couldn't. Today's beef, tomorrow's pork. Well, today they could eat, tomorrow they couldn't. The wine, I don't know about the wine. The wine may have been a problem for Daniel as well. We just don't really know. It may have been out of fear that the meats had been offered to idols. And that's the reasoning that you find in 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 18. See, those people in Corinth, believed that if the meat in the marketplace had been offered to an idol, that to eat it was effectively to worship at that God, to give honor to that God. And so these early young Christians, they didn't want to do that. That's where the big battle comes in Corinth between those who would eat meat. See, they understand better, and those who would not eat meat, they don't understand as well. Now, they're going to grow, probably, but it takes time. He made a petition in the form of a humble request. And you listen to the way Daniel deals with people. If there's anything that I think we can learn from this opening chapter, besides not wanting to be defiled by eating the king's food and drinking his wine, I think the next thing we need to learn from Daniel is there's a right way and a wrong way to handle people. If he had gone at this aggressively, he might not have been well received. He goes at it with humility. He makes a request. And what is his request? What's he asking for? Well, let's look at verse 9 and let's just find out. Now, God had brought Daniel into favor and goodwill of the chief of the eunuchs. And the chief of the eunuchs said to Daniel, I fear, my lord, the king, who has appointed your food and drink. For why should he see your faces looking worse than the young men who are your age? Then you would endanger my head before the king. So what's his request? He purposed not to defile himself, and he requested not to drink. What's he going to eat? If he doesn't eat what comes from the king's table, what's he going to eat? What does the text say? It says pulse. What's pulse? P-U-L-S-E. What is it? It's vegetables. And what's he going to drink? Water. Vegetables and water. So the chief of the eunuchs, who actually likes Daniel, notice God brought him into favor. How did God do that? Is that a miracle? Or is that because Daniel was a servant of God from his youth? We're going to see that in chapter 6. Because he was a servant of God from his youth, he had the kind of an attitude that just endeared him to people. And thus God brought him into favor through that attitude. Either one of those is possible. Which one's the answer? Hey, I get to say, I don't know again. I'm not sure. I just know that he was in favor with this chief of the eunuchs. And so the chief of the eunuchs is ready really to give him what he asked for, except for one thing. I don't mind helping you out, but it might cost me my head. I might end up dead because of this. And so that's his problem. Listen to Daniel's answer here. It comes particularly in verse 11 through 14. So Daniel said to the steward, whom the chief of the eunuchs had set over Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, please test your servants for 10 days and let them give us vegetables to eat and water to drink. Pulse is the old King James. So we got old King James? Is that yes? No? That's old King James. That's where you get it from. But it's vegetables and water. Please let us have that. Well, how are we going to deal with that? Listen further. Then let our appearance be examined before you, and the appearance of the young men who eat the portion of the king's delicacies. And as you see fit, so deal with your servants. So he consented with them in this matter and tested them 10 days. Now look at the approach again that Daniel takes. He doesn't insist you've got to change this no matter what. I don't care if it costs you your head. He doesn't do that. Instead he says, run a test. Now, while the chief of the eunuchs is viewing it as an external test, what do we see in Daniel out of this test? He trusts God. You're going to get the same answer later, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Watch them in chapter 3 when they say, our God can deliver us. But if He can't, because, and by the way, not can't because of power, it's can't because of a moral issue. We'll talk more about that when we get to chapter 3. But if He can't do that, well then so be it. We're not going to worship your God. They put their trust in the Almighty. And here's Daniel, along with the other 3, already putting their trust in the Almighty. How old are they? Well, we don't know. They may be very, very, very young. And yet they're doing that. If he's 20 at the time, that's pretty stout faith for a 20-year-old. You may disagree with me, but that, from my point of view, that's pretty stout faith, to believe in that. So that's what he does. So he puts his trust in God, asks for this test. So how does the test work out? Verse 15. At the end of 10 days, their features appeared better and fatter in flesh than all the young men who ate the portion of the king's delicacies. Thus the steward took away their portion of delicacies and wine that they were to drink and gave them vegetables. God made the test work. How did He do it? Okay, if my dad were still living, he and I would answer this question differently. Okay? I'm going to say God did it providentially. Now, here's what we need to realize. In Scripture, there is miraculous providence and there's non-miraculous providence. So, let me give you an example. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego are delivered by miraculous providence. When you start thinking about how, you could go outside tonight. I know it's because we came to the church building, came up in the parking lot. You just go stand in our parking lot for a few minutes. There are several people that are burning wood tonight. I could smell it when we came in. You go stand in the parking lot for a little while and then go home, and your wife has been at home all day, and Drew, she's going to say, "Where have you been?" And he's, "I've just been at work." "Well, no, I know better than that. You got a smoke smell. Where have you been, boy?" See, that's where that goes. See, with the idea, okay, they come out of that fire. They don't even have smoke smell. They don't, no hair singed. That's miraculous providence. What about non-miraculous providence? I think you see that in the life of Joseph several times. He finds favor under Potiphar. He finds the favor of the jailer. And then the king sees, Pharaoh, sees him as a special fellow with a special nature, and he puts him in a position of power. I don't think any of that requires a miracle. So it's non-miraculous providence. Now, how would Dad have said it? Well, he divided it this way: miracles and providence. That's what he divided. I have chosen not to do that. And since he was not alive when the book was printed, I got to put it my way in my part of the book. His way and his part of the book. So that's how we did it. So at any rate, I believe that this very well could be God working through natural means. So you say, wait a minute, can you get fat on vegetables? I will give you an easy answer. When Teresa wants nothing but vegetables for meals, day after day after day, I gain weight. I mean, I'm talking about pretty fast. Now, why is that? I don't know. I mean, some of you guys know way more about nutrition and all that than I do. But I gain weight. I put it on in pretty big hurry. I could be one of the biggest preachers in Brotherhood if I only ate vegetables. But anyway, so could God do it that way? And the answer to that is, well, yes, He could do it that way. Did He do it that way? There comes, I don't know. See, I get to say I don't know a lot in the book of Daniel. I don't know. I know He achieved the end that He wanted, and that Daniel and his companions were well received. It didn't stop there, did it? Continue to notice, beginning in verse 17. As for these 4 young men, God gave them knowledge and skill in all literature and wisdom. And Daniel had understanding in all visions and dreams. God gave them knowledge and wisdom. Anybody ever read James chapter 1? If any man lacks wisdom, let him ask of God, and give it to all men liberally. Do you think God miraculously gives you knowledge today? Wisdom? I don't think so. How can He give it to you? Make you a good student. Use what you've got. I think that's a possibility. How did He give it to these fellows? I don't know. There goes my key answer from the book of Daniel. I don't know. But He does give it to them. Now, at the end of the days, how many days? 3 years, right? At the end of 3 years. That's how long Nebuchadnezzar said. Train them for 3 years. So, at the end of the days, when the king had said they should be brought in, the chief of the eunuchs brought them in before Nebuchadnezzar. Then the king interviewed them, and among them all, none was found like Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Therefore they served before the king. And in all matters of wisdom and understanding about which the king examined them, he found them 10 times better than all the magicians and astrologers who were in all his realm. Thus Daniel continued until the first year of King Cyrus. How many years is that? From Nebuchadnezzar to Cyrus. How many years is it? In chapter 9 of Daniel, Daniel is going to read the book of Jeremiah. And as he reads the book of Jeremiah, he comes to the conclusion that it is time for them to leave Babylonian captivity. How long was Daniel in Babylon? 70 years. How old is he? Well, was he 20 at this point? See, I don't know. But was he 20 at this point? If he was, he's a 90-year-old man. He and your mama would have had an interesting conversation. If you think about it. And some others. But, right? 90-year-old man. And he doesn't just die there, by the way. He lives all the way to the 3rd year of Cyrus's reign. He serves through the 1st year. But he lives through the 3rd. So he's, 93? Maybe? We don't know. But it's a possibility. If he was 40, then he's 113. So he's an old man by the end. But how long was he in this place? 70 years. It wasn't always Babylon. We're going to see that. It goes from being Babylon to being Medo-Persia. That's what's going to happen before we get to the end. But that's what's being talked about here. So they rise to power. Daniel's given special ability to interpret dreams and visions. That will play a critical role in the rest of the book. Not just in reference to Nebuchadnezzar, although it certainly does with Nebuchadnezzar. Chapters 2 and 4 are both about his ability to be able to translate and interpret the dreams of Nebuchadnezzar with the help of God. There's no doubt about that. We'll come to that when we talk about these chapters. What about chapter 5? Doesn't he translate a vision there too? The vision of the hand that writes on the wall. Mene, Tekel, Upharsin, right? Yeah. Translates all those things. So God gives him special ability. It's going to come in handy in the land of Babylon. It's going to be used by him. They passed their interview with the king and surpassed all their fellows. It resulted in them serving, and they served in high capacity. You will notice as we go along that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, as we usually call them, Hananiah, Azariah, and Mishael, those three. Actually, I said it wrong. Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah. But anyway, when we look at those three, they don't serve as high as Daniel. Daniel's higher. in the kingdom. It becomes chief over the Chaldeans, the wise men. It does not say he is a Chaldean. And that's important. Why? Because some of the Chaldeans had some practices that I don't think Daniel would have been a part of. But I just say, the Bible doesn't say he was one of them. It says he was over them. And there's a difference. My grandfather was a line foreman for General Motors. I've mentioned that before. He was in management. If there was a strike, the line workers didn't go in, but Grandpa had to go in every day. And he and the other foreman would run the line. They didn't run it very fast. I can tell you that. There weren't enough of them, but they were in it. So he was not of their same category, and yet he's over them. I think there's something somewhat similar in that. Any questions or comments? This is how we get rolling into the book of Daniel. Okay, here's something I want everybody to realize. If you want to understand Revelation, you've got to understand Daniel. Daniel chapters 7 through 12 are apocalyptic literature. The book of Ezekiel is apocalyptic literature. The book of Zechariah also is apocalyptic literature. And when you read Daniel, especially once you enter chapter 7, and then you start reading Revelation, you're going to be amazed how many of the symbols are used again. Now, what apocalyptic literature? Let me define it in a simple way, and that is, it's prophetic. It's God speaking through his spokesman. But he's speaking in a time when his people are under duress. They're being persecuted. They're being tormented. Now, so imagine this. When the Romans were pounding on the Jews and the Christians, more especially the Christians, when they were pounding away at them, when they were taking them into the lion's den, or in with the lions in the Colosseum, and things like that. What do you think? How do you think it would have worked out if the book of Revelation said one of these days the Christians are going to beat Rome all to pieces? Christ is going to beat Rome. How do you think that would go over? Not very well. And so he doesn't write that way. Instead, he uses the language of prophecy and pulls it over. And people that knew prophetic writings, which the Christians would have, they all know what he's talking about. And the Romans just said, these people like a bunch of children's fairy tales. That's what they're going to see. And it saves their lives. Sometimes. Not always, but sometimes. And I think that's very, very important for us to see. So as we study the book of Daniel, especially when we get to chapter 7, you're going to start learning things about Revelation. And a little later in the year sometime, I think Derek's going to be in here teaching Revelation. And he will be referring to these images. I guarantee you, he's got to, because they're right there in Revelation. They're going to come back up. Okay. No questions? Man, I'm going to give you a minute and a half. I will get it back sometime, I promise you.